part of that school that were out talking, oh, you know what, my neighbor, my cousin, my brother, that were our own little messengers. And what's interesting is a group of cows is called a group of birds, depending on it, is a group of frogs is an army. Did you guys know that? Is an army. A group of frogs working together is an army. So all of a sudden we have this army of little frogs out in the community spreading the word. We also considered those other first encounters or those pieces, and so we actually did training with the crossing guards and those folks to be more aware of kindergarten kids coming in so that they could kind of celebrate them and encourage them from the very beginning. So the results, right? Oftentimes it gets down to this. So the year prior to our work, 25% of the kids were there on the first day of school. Before we did anything, and this was around in April, we were at 16%, so we were probably on a similar pace to reach that 25%. We piloted the practices that we just saw. And that fall, 100% of the kids were there the first day. 1 year. 1 year and a lot of work, right? And so at that point, our district, which was kind of lukewarm to this idea, said, I bet you can't do that again, right? So they gave us 3 similar schools and similar demographics, similar challenges, similar struggles, and we replicated the 100% in those 3 schools the year next, right? So the enrollment piece could be tackled with kind of this community approach. At the same time that they gave us, then after the 3 schools, they adopted for the district Ready Freddy as the official mascot for kindergarten. What we found, and this is something I always want to share, is you get out of it what you put into it. When marketing alone was used as the strategy, we don't get these numbers. We get improvements. As a district, within that year, we increased kindergarten enrollment, on-time enrollment, by 17%. So not to anything that we should be ashamed of at all. But to get the true numbers of a particular school with all the kids, it took these kind of teams in each school or each area. An example, it doesn't always have to be an exact school, but in one particular neighborhood, there's 3 elementary schools, and we kind of had a north side team that looked at that group. So the lessons learned about this were, 1, be visible. Get the information out there in multiple ways, in multiple formats. Being strategic. We learned about key partnerships. Along the way, when we started off, we'd go to 800 doors sometimes to find 20 to 30 kids. It's a lot of work, right? So in planning meetings, we really looked at who was interacting with the kids in different ways. And it was partly a partnership. There's 2 partnerships that were very, very valuable. First off, about 5 years ago, our Department of Human Services, what is it called? What is your Department of Human Services here? Are those that are over the both public welfare / foster care and all those systems, right? Family services, human services. Okay, so our equivalent to Department of Human Services entered into a data sharing agreement with our public school system. And a lot of lawyers were needed and some foundation dollars, but that we had one integrated system that you could look at from birth through school, those kids that were in both some type of public service or families that were in some type of public service, as well as the school data. Amazing, amazingly rich. And one of the things that we learned along the way is specifically for kindergarten, there's a huge number of kids that were part of some service. If you think of all the birth to 5 programs, there's a wealth of different types of ways that there's interfaces. We found that roughly 55 to 60% of our incoming kindergarten classes had interfaced with our human services, right? So another really targeted way to reach out to those families, postcards and other elements. We also learned that a large number of our children that were enrolling late were connected with and connected in our public housing neighborhoods, right? And I always want to preface this because I don't want to jump down that road of it's a low income problem or it's a race problem. It just happens that in particular there's the kid that is looking at our kids that are going to most need it, right? And our kids that maybe had less opportunity up to this point, But what we found is, across the realm, we had to have some type of general awareness because for kids missing even kindergarten days, it was kids that sometimes families that weren't aware. Sometimes it was families that took their kids out a lot for vacations and other things. So it wasn't always simply just an economic thing. But the strategic piece was partnering with our human services or human resources and our public housing. That instead of going to 800 doors to find 400 kids, we'd get lists from them. And either, depending on confidentiality and those types of agreements, they sent a team out or we sent out a team together. We would now knock on 50 doors to find 49 kids. Their records were so much better. They were better than oftentimes the school databases that didn't always keep up or weren't able to keep up with the changing addresses. And it also helped when families moved between different homeless settings as well. So being strategic, being concrete. Enrollment is this week. Enrollment is this day. And these are the things that you need to bring in. One of the big barriers that we found that a lot of families faced is that we said the magic was two things, right? So sometimes it's having access to that copy of the birth certificate was a barrier, and families are oftentimes asked to pay some type of fee to get a new copy or have that reprinted. Similar to immunization records. It's amazing. I probably don't keep access to my daughter's immunization record. It should be plastered to my, laminated in my pocket at all times. But when I go and get it reprinted, it doesn't cost me anything. At some of our health clinics, families were having to pay a $5 fee to have it reprinted. So one of the efforts that we made is we worked with clinics that wasn't one of the barriers that got in the way. We're also in the process with working more globally, that when a child goes in and gets their 4-year-old well visit where they get that shot, that there's an agreement that then they can sign something and that is sent to the school district that they likely will be going to break down that barrier in one other way. So it's really thinking about those elements that are getting in the way. Being welcoming, we talked a lot about that. So for the district as a whole, for all front office staff, did customer service training. And has taken a larger role in what those first experiences were like. School by school, our parents group, we have a parent group that's kind of our parent policy board, developed what they defined what welcoming schools is. They created the walkthrough checkoff sheet of what welcoming schools are, and they then go and assess the schools for welcoming schools. That to us, that was the best group. Those that were going to be receiving the school should have the strongest voice in that. And lastly, the thing that we learned about is being simple. The packet of information that was required to register for school, some of them were like this, triplicate, duplicative, the amount of times that a family had to enter their emergency contacts, because the schools, they wanted to get everything in one shot, right? And I completely understood that. They wanted the nurse form and this form and that form all in one packet, right? And so I got why that needed to occur. Interestingly, similar to here, we have a large number of, many of the schools have a pre-K or several pre-K classrooms in the elementary buildings. Interestingly, families had to fill out the packet when they enrolled in pre-K. They went to the same school the next year and had to refill out the same packet. Because the data system that the pre-K information was housed in was not collaborative or not communicative, depending on how your computer terms go, with this. So there was a simple bridge that one of the programmers developed that could bridge those two, and the records would then be swiped over to the other. And so families, instead of refilling out that packet, filled out one sheet that was an update of where they lived, just making sure that they lived in the same place, and an update of their emergency contacts one time. How much more respectful is that to parents than to say, what you did last year matters so little that we're going to have you redo it, or let's work out our pieces of it. So being more simple was one of the other pieces that we had. So the first encounters, right? The first encounters. Interesting. So if you think of the first encounters, first impressions, when school begins, there's somewhere it seems it's taught. We often hear, you have to be strong from the beginning, right? You have to set the tone. Grr. That works well for 5-year-olds, right? Yes, rules are important. Yes, the structure is important. Kindergarten kids were surveyed. Wouldn't that be a fun survey to do? No, that one would be something I'd sign up for. Kindergarten kids were surveyed as to what about the first encounter with a teacher, whether this was a transition event or whether this was the first day, helped them to feel good or less anxious about coming back. They were nice. They seemed nice. How simple is that, right? Would all of us prefer to go back to something where someone was welcoming and nice the first day? Yeah? Of course we would. So some of the practices are around this first encounter. And so this is a teacher with and I'll say this, a lot of times we've done some of our transition events, both for the coming in kindergarten class and the coming in pre-K class, like a dual event at times, right? And so this is actually a kiddo that's entering pre-K and meeting his teacher. So one of the challenges with planning these things is when we do these things, we don't always know which kid's going to be with what teacher because of the delayed enrollment, and even whether the teachers are going to change over. And the worst thing sometimes we could do is set kids up to be disappointed down the road. Here, fall in love with this teacher, and we get an extra classroom that came in late, so then we're reassigned. So we're really cautious about specifically kind of aligning that. And so what we thought is, what could we do that gives the chance for one-on-one encounters and multiple of them just in case it's not going to be the same person. So one of the examples of a planning committee came up with, let's run a carnival. Let's run a carnival, and the various teachers, guidance counselors, librarian, each run a different game. And so as the kids rotate, they get to meet each of the different personnel that they're going to be a part of and have a very simple but brief interaction where they get to know each other. And these simple briefs, the research says, are enough to reduce that type of anxiety because they've at least met them. Okay, so then there's the parent that's going around at the same time, first encounter. And if the teacher's supposed to be a little bit scary in the first day, who's the most scary person in the school? The principal. This principal's getting down with this kiddo that's going to be coming in and saying, if you ever need anything, if you're having a rough day, if you ever need a hug, you can come stop by my office. I'll be there. Beautiful, right? We want the adults in the rooms to be those that are the comforters and the nurturers. If you think about 5-year-olds, and not the ones that I don't want to see you in my office. Because that's bad news if you see me in my office, right? So it changes the culture of a school when you look at it from that perspective. We talked about the first day being very challenging. And we're thinking about, if you think of that, go back to your job, and you're starting a new job for the first time, that moment of greatest anxiety happens to be when you enter the building, right? If you think about it, the world in which you knew enters the world in which you're starting anew. And that very moment, it's kind of symbolic if you think about it opening the door. And I always thought, wouldn't it be nice if when I started a new job, my last boss could come with me? And when I'm feeling a little bit unsure of myself, they'd be like, you've done this before, it was a little bit different, but remember that time that you took that Excel sheet and you made it? And she would go, my former boss would also go to all the new people. I'm going to introduce you to Ken. He looks a little nervous today, but I want you to know, he's done such great work for us for the last couple of years. I'm sure he's going to do great things for you. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, that's a parent. That's a parent that, for this child, serves that role. They knew the successes. They know that the child's nervous. They know the things that help reduce the anxiety. So we had two goals. How do we reduce the anxiety on the first day? And two, how do we keep the parent engaged in that moment? So what we thought is, if kids are nervous entering school, let's take the school and put it outside for the first day. What's that look like? So on the first day of school, on the morning of the first day of K, what we have is, it started with, the first place that we did this was the Hill District in Pittsburgh. If anyone's seen Hill Street Blues, based off of this neighborhood, right? And so we had what was called Hands Across the Hill, if anyone remembers Hands Across America. We actually had a volunteer and school-based volunteers that were all the way from the school to the public housing community in this like welcoming line of stuff that was going on, right? And so the frog was out there, and this was like festivities and all this going on. And so you can see kind of this is the, this child coming into school. And this was one of our pilot schools. So I had worked with this girl the entire summer with this person. And so it's like the handoff from one community group to another on this kind of this magic day. And what's interesting is someone's like, aren't the kids kind of terrified? A couple of them are. And we have a special pathway when we see nervous kids that we kind of don't overdo it during that moment. But there's a very scientific measure of kids' comfort with the first day of school. We call it the percent of criers. Right? Very, right? And if anyone's been around a first day of kindergarten, there's typically, anywhere from several to a few criers, sometimes even the parents, Well, I should reverse that. Sometimes even the children. And what's been interesting about this event that we piloted in one school, then went to 3, then went to 7, went to 8. This is the first year that we're going to be doing it with 20 schools. And that, honestly, is only because our United Way has become a very active partner. And they use it as one of their days. Anyone United Way connected here? Our United Way uses it as one of their days of caring. So community volunteers sign up for the day, they get a shirt, they're one of the ones. And this is the training for the first day of school. Okay, your job is to smile at the kids when they come in, say, great, we're happy to have you here. And then look to the parent and say, great job, Mom. Great job, Dad. Keep it up, right? That alone, and it's amazing the number of parents who just light up. And so the parents are there for the little bit that occurs on outside, then the parents come into the auditorium. We do you-rah-rah with the teachers and introductions, and then the parents go down, they see the classroom, because a lot of the parents, even with all the best transition practices that we've tried, this might still be their first time. This might still be their first time in the building. So we want them in that moment. So then they get to go down to the classroom where they actually then truly meet that child's teacher. There's a book read with the parents watching. The teacher then turns and says, thanks, parents. And the parents quietly walk out. And we have a debrief with the parents in a room where they have a breakfast. And the parents are typically, there's still a couple of tears, but they're like, man, I wish my other children had that encounter when they started school. And it's been now just a growth of what we've done. And there's always nuances. And it can be a logistical, hard thing to do, but there's elements of what we can do. If it's a busing community, it can be hard because a lot of ours are walking, so if it's a busing community, perhaps there's other ways that we could do something, but it's really about making a big hoopla around that first day, making it a rite of passage, and making it something that's very welcoming and warm. And this is just showing that it's extended all the way down the street. Okay, so what do? We have, if we've done this all well, right, we have people embraced around the entire practice of engagement and enrollment. But how do we make things good, better, best? I got time. I'm going to go through the list of common transition practices, and we're going to do some subtleties to discern from if you did this, good outcomes. If you did this, just a little bit better. If you did this, perhaps best. Perhaps best. So one of the most common practices is teachers sending a letter to the parent, or sending a letter to the child, right? Any of my teachers do something similar to this? Yep. Now, one of the challenges, and I understand this is a challenge, and I don't always know how to overcome this, is you may not know who your entire class is until the day of kindergarten, right? With assignments and late enrollees and that type of thing. But if you think about it, if we got the enrollment piece down, these other pieces become a lot easier. So it is truly all interconnected. So my own brother-in-law, who teaches at kindergarten in Wisconsin, I said, do you do this? He said, absolutely. It's district mandated that an August something date, and theirs is actually 2 weeks there. They have pretty much all but most, their kids registered and assigned by mid-August when they start after Labor Day. Wisconsin's a state that is required. They can't start school before Labor Day because the farming industry and the amusement park industry would not have people for Labor Day weekend. Huh, amazing how that works, right? But, so I said, can you send me my letter? I bet it's going to be great. I want to use it as an example. And so his is a very similar letter that I see to what a lot of teachers send out. Dear parent of blah, 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 right? I'm so excited to be your kindergarten teacher. This year we're going to be working on comprehension, retention, correlations with those, and we're going to use the dibbles, the schmibbles, and the wibbles to assess your child through multiple modes and mediums so that we can assure qualitative analysis of the group, right? Because the teacher's trying to impress the parent, which I understand, because they want the parents to be excited about that teacher because they're the most qualified teacher. It's not that parents don't care about that, right? It's not that parents don't care. But is that maybe the most successful way to kind of, especially if parents are going to read that to child, because that would be really nice, because we want the child to be less anxious too. So we said, let's try this. First of all, and to ensure that it's going to be opened, instead of a letter, let's make it a postcard. Okay, kind of stands out. And so, postcard. We'll do a postcard. So that was, to do a letter, all good. This is kind of a need better. So, and we'll do a postcard, and it's not that the postcard itself is better, but it just increases your likelihood of it being read. And his name is Ryan. I said, Ryan, tell me a couple things that you like. Well, I like pizza. Cool. I love hanging out with my dog. Awesome. And I love going to baseball games. Hi, I'm Mr. And of course, the school last name. Hello. Hi, I'm Mr. Ewing. I'm excited to be. Oh, you know the little thing that you can do in Excel that actually puts the child's name in? So the parent of so-and-so, which helped. I'm Mr. Ewing. I'm excited to be your child's teacher. Just a couple things about me. I can't wait to meet you. And I like bulleted pizza. I love playing with my dog and I love going to baseball games. Why would that be important, or why would that be better? You think between those three things, there's not a large number of those kids that at least one of those things is something similar to them? Right? Oh, he likes baseball, I love baseball. He likes pizza, who doesn't like pizza? Like, you know, it's like, it's one of those things that puts that teacher in the same something of connectedness with that child. So that's good, better, right? And the last element is, when we interviewed kindergarten kids, what did they say was important? Nice, right? So signed by the teacher's name and a picture of that teacher smiling. So they could see the face in which they were going to be interacting with. The picture looked at least warm and welcoming in some regard. And so you found a characteristic that was similar to you, and you saw a face of someone that you might feel comfortable with. Best. So that's one example of taking things, and if you're thinking about it and strategic about it, you can increase the likelihood of both welcoming, engaging, and reducing the anxiety. Tour of the school. I'm watching my time because I can go like 10 minutes on each of these ones, so I'll be careful. Okay, so the tour of the school. Common practice. Similar things that come up. Is it good or, there's the good and the bad. There is the great of seeing the school. That's good. It's ideal if a child's seeing the school. But the challenge again, do we know what classroom they're going to be in? We may not know that when they come and do the tour. So we have to be clear that this is an example of a kindergarten room versus this is your kindergarten room, because you set yourself up when you kind of say these are concretes in that moment. So tours of the building are great. One of the things that we've talked about and try to get at is how do they see large parts of the building, but it's fun and engaging. And the most common thing that we've done now that we've learned that helps is using it as a scavenger hunt. Any folks do that? Scavenger hunt? And again, it's a great way, because if you do this as a parent-child activity, that the parent is kind of the coach of the child through kind of navigating them a building, and they come into the building, and for us, the frog is kind of there, hey, welcome. And they kind of get started, and they start with like a scavenger hunt of going to find where the nurse's office versus the auditorium versus all the places that they will be encountering during the first days, weeks of the year of kindergarten. if we've worked it out, and if it works out in different cases, really great. If those personnel that will be in those places are there. So when they go to the nurse's office, the nurse says, hey, welcome, right? And we've even almost made it in places like trick-or-treating, that they get like a toothbrush from the nurse's office, and then they get something from the next place, right? As they kind of go and do the scavenger hunt. But ideal to see multiple places and meet multiple people with these short interactions, which are really, really useful for that kindergarten tour. Based on, again, surveys of kindergartners, this one's not so much a survey, but a kind of awareness piece. What room was essential for kindergarten kids to see? Bathroom. The number, you think of it, this is the age where both anxiety and challenges with bowel and all that are kind of met. So seeing where the bathrooms were one of the pieces that reduced anxiety, especially for those kids that's a struggle with, which they have. So we have the good of a tour, the better of kind of a engaging and fun place to see multiple places of the building, just in case they won't know that particular classroom. And then even better is then also then having the person there. Now the final piece that makes all these things wrapped up into the best is we've done where when they go and they get the toothbrush, they get a picture of the nurse in the nurse's office, and they collect pictures of each of these places that they've gone on in their tour. At the end, they staple it, they put their own cover on that book, right? They put their own cover on that book, and not only that did they do the tour for that one day, for the next weeks or months leading up to school, they have a book that shows all the things that they will go through, and it can be reread to them, especially like the nights before and the days before school's begun, right? So another good example of how you can really kind of make the most use of that moment. Some of these I won't go into as great detail, but summer programming. I always find it kind of astonishing. Like in our community, there was a program for kids that were in kindergarten going to first grade, for first graders going to second, third, and so on and so forth, right? We didn't have as many, especially not as many. Few and far between programs for pre-K to K during the summer. It's like, who funds them, right? Who funds that pocket? Is in that window of time. You guys have something going on, right? That's great. Because typically, there's difficulty with ownership over that moment of time. And so we've worked with different groups that kind of cover different pockets during the time. And we have ones that are more academic-based, we have ones that are more kind of enrichment-based, and we have ones that are more wraparound family-based. But all the literature that's out there, all of the United Way work now with third grade reading really targets one of the elements being summer slide. And I want to remind us that summer slide is as vital, if not more vital, during that critical year as well. Teacher home visits. Teacher home visits is one of the practices that best supports parent engagement, long-standing parent engagement. In fact, the studies that I have read about kindergarten home visits were here in Durham. And this was a little while ago, but a protege of Dodge, Amy Schulte. Do you know Amy? She's in Minnesota now. Yeah, we presented at that thing before. And so the impact of these kind of first inroads of actually going out and meeting families before. It's highly effective practice, but with all the nuances and challenges, 5% of districts actually use teacher home visits by means. So really good work out in Sacramento, California with what they call porch visits as well, where it's less of a hindrance on the family to feel like they have to look or have their house a certain way, that it's brief visits kind of in the doorway that just introduces them. And we did something similar in Pittsburgh, and when we took our teachers out to the community, they were celebrities. It was quite amazing to walk with a teacher through the community. When the teachers went out in the community, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, and you talk about a kindergarten teacher who the third graders were like, hey, and they're like, what are you doing at this house? I'm looking for so-and-so. Oh no, they're over at this right now. Let me take you over there. Amazing. So a good way to really engage your parents there. Transition folders, or sometimes it's called work sampling, right? So samples of the pre-K work that's then given to the kindergarten teacher. That practice of all of these, was the one that had the greatest effect through